Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is Haunted Houses and Astral Projection. I want to mention Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the work of Astral Club, you will find a link in the description. Next up, if you like this video, please make sure you hit the like button and make sure that bell is a solid bell. That way, you'll always get notified when there's new episodes on Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning. From time to time, when I'm talking about rescuing a variety of lost spirits who tend to be mired in the depths of the lower astral, people will ask me, why didn't you try to save X? Why aren't angels swooping down to save these individuals? I want to answer that, and I also want to explain more about the whole phenomena. And I'm going to be also consulting one of my favorite books, The Projection of the Astral Body by Sylvan Muldoon. I just love this book because so many of his experiences and what he writes about, I have directly experienced myself, which is why I'm talking about it. I don't just talk about books if I haven't actually experienced it myself, but this guy was so right on. And he's writing this thing back in 1929, long before Bob Monroe and Journeys Out of the Body was a twinkle in Mr. Monroe's eyes. So, one of the main misunderstandings that I think some people have, perhaps not the people here in Astral Club, but others, they seem to think that when one passes over, somehow you become some sort of an enlightened being, where the mists of time and everything that has occluded your physical vision suddenly parts, like the sun coming out from the departing rain clouds of a rainy day, that suddenly it's all revealed to you, and you've got all this knowledge, and all of your pain and pleasures and history and all the rest of that suddenly comes into focus, and you can now think clearly. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. When you pass over, you are still the same person you were before you left your physical body. And depending on your belief system and the circumstances of your passing, it can be quite traumatic, and it can really test what you're made of. And one of the reasons why there's such a problem in the in helping or assisting these entities is because they can become so mono-focused on their desires and their sufferings and their habits that you can't get through to them. My wife is extremely well focused when it comes to a variety of tasks. When she's working, when she's reading, or even just watching a deeply interesting program, she can become so engrossed and so focused that I could speak to her, and she may even give monosyllabic answers that are semi legitimate to what I was talking about. But I realized fairly quickly that she is not listening to me. Her mind is focused elsewhere. I could talk on and on and on, and bam, it doesn't sink in because 99% of her mind is focused on the task at hand, and that 1% that she's leaving on autopilot just to mollify and keep me quiet, it isn't going anywhere. It's not sinking in because she's so focused. Now, for her, that can be quite a benefit because her work can be quite involved. But once you pass over, this is not necessarily a positive attribute, especially if you're someone who is dwelling on your past desires. So I want to mention, I want to read a little bit from Muldoon's book because it is so accurate to what I've experienced. And this is in his section he calls Phantoms of the Dead are often dominated by the stress or desire or habit. He goes on to say, this is one of the reasons for haunted houses and haunted localities. Phantoms of the dead may have desire and habit so strongly embedded within them that they will continue steadfastly in their habits and conduct, even after becoming conscious, after they've passed over, simply because the stress is there and they must work it off. It is the same stress of desire or habit or both which the phantom tries to work off when we sleep. So many of your stresses during the day come out during your dreams or, God forbid, nightmares. So that's how it's blown off while you're in the physical. Knowing this, we are able to force the subconscious will to move out of the phantom while we sleep. Phantoms of the dead for a time after entering the astral plane do not conduct themselves in a manner differing from projected phantoms of the living. In other words, in the very florid words they used to use back in the 20s, there's not a great difference between those who have passed on and those who are still, wandering about in the physical. Some of these may remain unconscious for a time. In other words, they'll pass over, but they remain in an unconscious state. And believe me, you cannot reach them when they're in an unconscious state. Others, though, are conscious even before their astral cable snaps. And others roam about in a dream or partially conscious. And I've mentioned those people before. There's a lot of what I call sleepwalkers running around the astral plane. They're not conscious of what they're doing. However, they are working through some sort of serious stress that was available to them, bedeviling them in the physical, that they're now working out as they sleep. And it is so stressful to them that it actually causes their astral body to leave their physical and in an unconscious state try to work through that trauma. He goes on to say, while in either the unconscious or partially conscious condition, the phantom is under the stress of habit or desire and does not deviate from it as long as that suggestion remains active. Many people who report seeing spirits, hauntings, often mention that the entities don't seem to be aware of them. They can see the entity, but the entity seems to be in a dream. It seems to be sleepwalking. It seems to be going through the same motions that it did when it was alive and fulfilling the various habits that it had in the prior lifetime. In my experience, entities cannot be helped until they have finally worked through, burned off that stress, which can take a lot longer in the astral than it does in the physical. And there are some entities that are just really tough. Their will is strong, and you can't get their attention. I mean, first of all, you really need an invitation in order to assist another entity. There has to be a plea for help. And as far as I can tell, it's the same for when I'm trying to help someone or an angel guide is trying to help someone. There must be that request. I have found that it is possible to assist through the power of directed will, or let's call it prayer. When you're in the physical and you're aware of a situation, it's possible that you and others might direct energy or a prayer to assist that individual. Perhaps, in other words, extending a vicarious invitation to help this entity. That can get the attention of some angelic type guides. Whether it actually works or not isn't 100%, but it is something that I have noticed can be tried and at times can be successful. The main point is, after death, habits remain unbroken. Desires can be unappeased, and the stress of them will remain. The phantom or ghost goes through the process of appeasing some of this desire which he had in the flesh or the habit to which he has become accustomed. So this is why you want to be very careful about how you conduct yourself in the physical, trying to avoid becoming obsessed or addicted to any particular habits, particularly harmful ones, or any types of substances which become a unappeased desire that will follow you into the next life. And going on to the next life is challenging enough without bringing that extra baggage with you. So what would I recommend? Well, I would recommend that one slowly removes these types of negative desires and habits. You don't want to do it cold turkey, but reduce your reliance on these variety of substances slowly. Now, and I'm talking anything from coffee and cigarettes right on up to heroin. And I'm not saying that they're all equivalent, but I am saying that they do create desire in the human body of varying degrees. And while I suppose it's possible there are folks haunting the Starbucks, I think much more harmful desires are certainly out there, which is why your bars, your dive bars, and places where drugs are used and abused, and a variety of other very negative type places, you don't want them to become part of who you are, because it will only make things more difficult for you. But at the same time, you also have some very important knowledge here. You know that you can request help and aid once you've passed over if you feel trapped. And that can happen, believe me. I recall once, when I was a little bit depressed, and I've told this story before, I decided to astral project, which wasn't a good idea. And I ended up becoming mired in this area where I'd had a car accident. Nobody was injured. I never really realized it was that traumatic, but evidently it must have been on some level to me. So I felt myself trapped there and mired there. And even then I realized how ridiculous it was, but the feeling was so powerful. So what you want to do is, when you practice meditating here in the physical, clearing your mind of desires, of habits, of addictions, practice sending a pure white signal, a request for help, a request for aid, so that when it is your time to pass over, that you are knowledgeable enough to know that no matter what, Help is available as long as you are able and knowledgeable about the fact that you have to actually request it, so that you don't end up spending some amount of hellish time just going through the motions of whatever habits or addictions you had while you were still in the physical body. If you liked that podcast, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure that's a solid bell so you're notified on Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning when there's new episodes. And please give me your questions and your comments. I love that stuff. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.